just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off you. You'd be like heaven to touch. I wanna hold you so much. At long last, love has arrived, and I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off you.
Surprisingly, the Four Seasons, from the beginning, has really been the work of two guys. Members of the group come and go, but to this day, Frankie Valli's partner is Bob Gaudio. Bob was born across the Hudson River in the Bronx, but he moved to New Jersey as a teenager and quickly got into music. He played in local high school groups, at dances, and church socials. He started to write music and came up with an astonishing success almost immediately.
Man, dig that crazy chick.
The first song I wrote turned out to be Short Shorts, which was not much of a song, but it was a very big hit record. And from that point on, I just kind of stayed with it. It sort of was a hobby when it first started and turned into being a business, and it's always been fun.
He went from teenager to recording star literally overnight, taking most of the high school group with him. They were known as the Royal Teens. Bob Gaudio is one of the most consistently successful songwriters in the history of rock. He's written more than 30 hit records: Ragdoll, Silence is Golden, Sherry, Big Girls Don't Cry, Walk Like a Man, Dawn, Let's Hang On, Can't Take My Eyes Off You, Who Loves You, December 1963, and many, many more. After a couple of years, the Royal Teens broke up and Bob Gaudio joined a new group that became the Four Seasons. They started slowly at first, but in 1962, the incredible parade of Four Seasons hits began.
My flash recollections are we recorded a song that was called Sherry. We were playing at a local bar somewhere in South Jersey for the summer. The next thing I remember is Dick Clark played it on one of his Saturday afternoon shows, and 3 days later it sold 200 or 300,000 records, and before we knew it, it was number one.
It was amazing. From obscurity to superstardom nearly in seconds. Four Seasons Records owed their success to the remarkable 3.5-octave voice of Frankie Valli. Singing was his goal in music, but in those days, you couldn't just be a singer.
I wanted to be a singer, but in order to work, you had to play and sing. All things turn around. Today, most groups are self-sustaining. They play and sing and write and everything. And I had one of those kind of groups in those days.
At first, he didn't play an instrument, but when he tried out for a singing job and found he needed one, he got one fast.
I lied and told him I played bass and went out and bought a bass from a pawn shop and took it home and played records and got a feel of what bass playing was like, and I faked bass with this guy's trio for 3 years.
He quit school at an early age, firmly convinced that music was his life. It may well have been, but it wasn't yet his livelihood. He had to work at a variety of jobs just to keep eating.
I was a hairdresser for a while. I worked construction for a while. I wasn't too proud to do anything. You know, I just wanted to escalate my life and get out of what I knew I could get out of if I worked hard enough. I just wanted to do something with my life.
He was willing to work, yes, but not at anything that would jeopardize his music.
I never took a job that promotions were in line and that whole kind of thing. If I felt that was happening, it already scared me and I wanted to get away from it. So I just stayed away from that kind of thing. I did fill-in work. My main goal was to stay in this business and work hard on it until I had developed myself so that I could make it.
Earning a musical living in the New York, New Jersey area was tough in those days. You had to be able to handle any kind of music. Frankie worked with groups under a variety of names, playing weddings, bar mitzvahs, high school proms, and anything else he could get. They were called the Romans, the Topics, the Four Lovers, and a bunch of other names, including the Varietones.
The Varietones came out of the fact that we had done just about everything. We did some Polish music and Italian music, and we did country music. We did a little bit of everything.
But the years of dedication and obscurity paid off on a scale beyond imagination. When Sherry hit, the Four Seasons hit the top and stayed there.
12 or 15 weeks, we dominated the #1 spot. Sherry was #1, and Sherry was replaced by Big Girls Don't Cry, #1, and Big Girls Don't Cry was replaced by Walk Like a Man, #1.
The Four Seasons spent their first few years in the background, literally. It wasn't until the little man with the 3.5-octave voice stepped out front that the Four Seasons reached their heights. We'll look at that next on the Special of the Week. It didn't make headlines at the moment, but the turning point in the group's career probably came during the late 50s in Pittsburgh. Bob Gaudio remembers the first time he met Frankie Valli.
We did a TV show together. He was with a group called the Four Lovers, and I was with my first group, which was the Royal Teens. And we just kind of struck up conversation. And then I left the Royal Teens about 2 years later, and we ran into each other again and started the Four Seasons.
Names. Frankie Costelluccio has known many. Ladies and gentlemen, the Special of the Week proudly presents Frankie Valli and the Romans.
Come si bella, you are so very beautiful, you are so very wonderful.
And now our special guests, the Four Lovers.
Girl in my dreams, girl in my dreams.
Actually, they still were the Four Lovers when Bob Gaudio joined them. It wasn't until later they changed to the Four Seasons while auditioning for a job at a nightclub by that name. They didn't get the gig, but the name stuck and somehow seemed to mark the beginning of new directions. As Frankie describes it, things began to come together.
We had a lot of inner workings in the group, a lot of talented people. People like Bob Gaudio and Bob Crew, who had been producing a lot of hit records in the 50s. He's producing records like the Freddie Cannon records and the Rays, Danny and the Juniors, and that whole Philadelphia scene for a while was Bob Crew's Cameo Parkway or Swan Records.
Working with Bob Crew was an important step, too. Crew had experience in making hits, but it didn't pay off right away. As Bob Gaudio reports, the magic was somewhat slow in coming.
We did some background studio work. We kind of did a lot of lounge work. We did some stuff with Bob Crew, backing a lot of records and vocally and instrumentally. And about 2 years of working in the background before we came to the surface with Sherry. We had one record out before Sherry called Bermuda, and that was a zip.
She went sailing on a coral sea, started wonder, my darling indeed.
The success of the Four Seasons came mostly with material generated from within. Exotic subjects like Bermuda didn't work for Frankie Valli. His special gift is in telling stories about his kind of people.
Records like Dawn and Walk Like a Man and Let's Hang On were very real situations in the sense that they were things that people related to, that they had gone through in their lives.
There ain't no good in our goodbye. True love takes a lot of trying. Oh, I'm crying.
Let's hang on to what we got. Don't let go, girl, we got a lot. Got a lot of love between us. Hang on, hang on, hang on. What we got.
For several years after meeting up with Bob Crew, the Four Seasons were solely used as background singers and musicians, with the exception of the unsuccessful record Bermuda. They had to rely on their nightclub work to keep going. It was as an entertainer that Frankie Valli began to develop the full use of his incredible voice. It's funny how a wide variety of different factors come together all at once. Around the time that Bob Gaudio was writing Sherry, Bob Crew happened to catch the Four Seasons act at a Jersey nightclub. Frankie was doing an imitation of an old, high-voiced female entertainer named Rose Murphy. Now, Crew suggested they use that high voice on their next record, which turned out to be Sherry. The record sold 180,000 copies the first day and set in motion the Four Seasons formula. Success equals Bob Crew producing and helping with writing, plus Bob Gaudio writing, plus Frankie Valli's voice.
I've always had it. It's something that I just had naturally. And the people who were writing material for me or for the group in that period of time were taking advantage of the fact that I had more than a 3-octave range. And they wrote specifically to use that and utilize.
Frankie can sing even higher than what we're used to from the Four Seasons. They once had a hit record with a Bob Dylan song, which was so unusual, they released it under another name, The Wonder Who.
Frankie's always had that strange voice. We've used it on a couple of things in some of the older albums. I don't remember exactly how it went down, other than we knew we had a super track, and the arrangement was fabulous. We just knew it was there. But vocally, it was, I don't know, a little too low, or something was wrong, and the lead, when he put it on, didn't quite sound exciting enough, and he started clowning around with the high voice. And it started working. It started sounding really good, so we went through with it and finished the record that way, and convinced Phillips at the time to, hey, what's the difference? Let's give it a shot. We've got nothing to lose. And a station in Atlantic City did an interview, and we happened to have an acetate of it. And he said, hey, I would really like to put the interview on and play the record and just ask what's going on with the record. And we said, okay, great, but, don't get us into any trouble. I mean, one time, because it's not a released piece of product, and Phillips will have a lawsuit and so on and so forth. As it turned out, he played it every hour on the hour for like 2 weeks, and it became #1 at the station in requests, and the company was forced to put it out, and it went top 10.
Why, babe, why, babe? Why, babe, why, babe?
Ain't no use sitting wondering why, babe.
Why, babe, why, babe?
It don't matter anyhow. Oh, it ain't no use to sit and wonder why, babe.
Why, babe, why, babe?
If you don't, I know by now. When the rooster crows at the break of dawn, look out your window and I'll be gone.
You're the reason that I'm traveling on. Don't think twice,
It's alright.
why, babe, why, babe? Why, babe, why, babe?
In this day of high-priced concert tours and packed auditoriums, it's interesting to note that Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, by whatever name, have been on the road for well over 20 years. The skill of Frankie Valli in front of a live audience is the key to his great success today.
I love what I do. And performing is as much, if not the most important part of what I do as making the records and caring about the audiences. I came from that other side of the track. The larger majority of the world comes from that same side. These are the people you're appealing to.
You only have to think a moment to realize the Four Seasons have had their ups and downs, both before and after success. Frankie's dynamic impact as a performer is what has kept him hanging in there. Hit records or not, he and the Four Seasons can always earn a living.
The only thing that you can actually rely on in this business is that you go out and do a great show and people come in and see that show. And if the show is great, the next time you come back, they will be there again.
During one of those hitless periods, the group signed with Motown Records. It was a bad move for Motown and the Four Seasons. Nothing seemed to work out, and the period was a total drain on the Seasons' career. Well, almost, except for one record.
It was originally recorded for Motown Records, where we spent about 2.5 years in obscurity. Very few people even knew we were with the company. It was one of the things that they weren't terribly fond of. When we left, we bought back the track.
Motown never released it, but Private Stock, the new label, sure did.
I thought it was a hit song the day the song was shown to me. And when we recorded it, I said, this is a hit song. It's got to be a hit song. It's such a great song. It's the kind of a song that will become a standard.
The name of the song was My Eyes Adored You. It was written by Bob Crewe and a young man named Kenny Nolan. It rescued the name of Frankie Valli from those 2.5 years of obscurity. And it showed again the truth of Frankie's philosophy. You talk to the people you know.
I'm sure that every guy that was really hung up on a girl would have liked to be so poetic as to say to a girl, my eyes adored you. I mean, or can't take my eyes off of you. But that also depended on the neighborhood you came from. In a song, it was one thing. If you came from a rough neighborhood, you didn't tell a girl, my eyes adored you. It was different. The environment had an awful lot to do, but you didn't mind hearing somebody else say it.
My eyes adored you. Though I never laid a hand on you, my eyes adored you. Like a million miles away from me, you couldn't see how I adored you. So close and yet so far. Carried your books from school, playing make-believe you're married to me. You were 5th grade, I was 6 when we came to be. Walking home every day over Barnacle Bridge and Bay, till we grew into me and you went our separate ways. My eyes adored you. Oh, I never laid a hand on you. My eyes
the love I left behind. My eyes adored you, but I never laid a hand on you. My eyes adored you. Like a million miles away from me, you couldn't see how I adored you. So close and yet so far. My eyes adored you. All my life I will remember. Though I never laid a hand on you. My eyes adored you. Like a million miles away from me, you couldn't see how I adored you. Feel inside regrets. So close. I know I will never forget you, my darling. My eyes adored you. Though I never laid a hand on you. My eyes adored you.
Next, we examine the Four Seasons. Are they people? Are they an idea? Or are they just a state of mind? The Seasons of today bear almost no resemblance to the guys who used to sing behind Frankie Valli.
Basically, I'm the only original member in the group of the active working members. And ain't nobody gonna come along and take that away, because I love what I do.
It's not surprising that the group, or rather the name, occupies an emotional place in Frankie's memory.
It's like having a child. I gotta say that the Four Seasons is the thing that finally took me to the place I wanted to go in my life.
Swear to God, there's no one else on earth I'd rather be. Swear to God, you made me see, so I believe in me.
The truth is that Frankie Valli now plays a distinctly background role with the Four Seasons.
I don't sing on all Four Season records, as you probably know, and you can tell from listening to the Who Loves You album. I am singing very little on that. In reconstructing the Four Seasons, the first thing I looked for was very talented people. And I think I have probably the best set of Four Seasons there ever was.
The original Four Seasons you and I remember from the old days were Frankie, Bob Gaudio, Nick Massey, and Tommy DeVito. For a variety of business and personal reasons, Frankie is the only one performing with the group today. The new Four Seasons are Don Ciccone, who plays bass. Don used to be with a group named The Critters and wrote a hit called Mr. Dyingly Sad. He also sang on the Man from Nationwide insurance commercials. John Paiva plays lead guitar. Lee Shapiro plays keyboards. He also arranges and conducts the group. He has classical training. The drummer is Jerry Polci, who once studied with Joe Morello of the Dave Brubeck Quartet, a jazz group. Like the rest of the guys, Jerry doesn't really come out of the Four Seasons past.
When Sherry came out, I was 10. So at that time, I was still trying to figure out myself, rather than, running around playing baseball with the guys, rather than listening to too much music.
Jerry typifies the new emphasis of the Four Seasons.
At one time, the Four Seasons were noted as a vocal group. I mean, Frankie Valli, Four Seasons, the whole idea of the harmony and the tight-knit vocal qualities. They were good players, but now the band is comprised of very good players, and our vocal prowess is matched by our musical prowess. So now, no matter what we sing, we can always back it up with good music.
The Four Seasons keep pace with the times, but the pace setter is still Bob Gaudio. Bob writes all their songs, with Judy Parker now, and produces the group. They're better musicians today because that's the direction he's going.
The new group is completely schooled. Everybody reads, everybody plays, and even though they've been schooled, they still have come far past that and are into their own thing now.
The new developments of the Four Seasons have given Bob Gaudio a whole new lease on musical life.
Well, there's much more leeway for me. It's much more exciting as a writer because I can stretch out. The albums, I think, are much more diversified. The Four Seasons were never known to be an album group, but I think they are now, and in the future it's going to get even bigger.
Bob hasn't toured with the group for several years. He still sings and plays on albums, but he doesn't like appearing live.
When I was in the group, I was never Mr. Excitement on stage. It was never quite my thing. I always kind of felt like the little goldfish in the bowl. I stayed with it. I learned a lot by being on the road, but I really think it took away from me personally as a writer. and as a producer, and I'm much happier now just doing that.
The first album from the current Four Seasons produced a smash single called December 1963. Originally, Judy and Bob wrote it as a story about the repeal of Prohibition. It was called December 5th, 1933. The lyrics went something like this. Mush and mash beneath their feet, doing the Charleston in the street. Ain't no way to be discreet, rolling round in a rumble seat. Oh, what a night, December 5th in 1933.
And we had a long discussion after the song was written. We'd already laid down the basic musical track, and we pro'd and conned it a little bit, and then Bob went home and rewrote the lyric to fit a generation that would understand.
As Frankie suggests, the song needed to be a little more now. Who knows what would have happened had they not changed it, but they did. And the world was treated to a very contemporary story, not about booze, but a young man's first experience with a girl.
Oh, what a night. Late December back in 63. What a very special time for me. As I remember what a night. Oh, what a night. You know I didn't even know her name, but I was never gonna be the same. What a lady, what a night. Oh, I got a funny feeling when she walks in. 'Cause I recall it ended much too soon. Hypnotizing, mesmerizing me. She was everything I dreamed she'd be. Sweet surrender, what a night. I felt the rush like a rolling ball of thunder, spinning my head around and taking my body
Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons have become two separate acts on two different record labels, with maybe even twice as much money. That's next on the Special of the Week. We'll be right back. Seasons' name is owned jointly by Bob Gaudio and Frankie Valli. It's a remarkable business relationship, a basically handshake deal that's lasted more than 16 years. Gaudio and Valli split everything up the middle. Frankie Valli is not featured with the Four Seasons anymore. He just lends his talent and his great voice as part of their efforts. The Four Seasons record on Warner Curb Records. Frankie Valli, the artist, is signed to private stock. Mike Curb, president of Warner Curb, launched his company with the help of the Four Seasons.
Well, I had a luncheon with Bob Gaudio, about a year and a half ago. And at that time, Bob and I kind of discussed the concept of a new Four Seasons sound that would be based upon all the great harmony sounds and all the great melodic concepts that they had used in the past, but with a more current today flavor.
It was a very successful venture. In their first year of business, the Four Seasons and Mike Curb sold 5 million records. Mike Curb is, of course, an artist and producer himself. He produces the Osmonds and is a former president of MGM Records.
Well, originally, he discussed the fact that maybe the two of us would produce the album together. And after I heard the first song that Bob was working on by himself, I told Bob that the last thing he needed is for me or for anybody to co-produce with him, because I believe Bob is just one of the great creative producers in the record business today. And I think that maybe he did need a little more confidence at the time, but that was all he needed, because he certainly had the talent.
Bob Gaudio had suffered some artistic confusion and loss of confidence because of a disastrous album in 1968 called The Genuine Imitation Life Gazette.
It was highly accepted in as far as the underground magazines at the time, the Rolling Stones and the Berkeley Bobs and so on and so forth, review-wise. It got fabulous reviews, but every review ended off with, too bad it's not the Moody Blues or someone of that nature. It probably would be a #1 album. But unfortunately, it's the Four Seasons, and who can believe that?
After 6 years of million-selling hits, Bob Gaudio attempted to move the group, to make it progress, but the public wouldn't let him. It just wasn't in the Four Seasons image. The problem continues even today with the current Four Seasons. Their album, Who Loves You, was a great success, but Mike Curb wonders what it could have been if the public didn't have a set picture of what the Four Seasons are.
I've thought many times that if the last album, the album that was entitled Who Loves You, had been called another name other than the Four Seasons, it probably would have been one of the major FM albums of 1976.
The failure of the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette album was a blow to Bob Gaudio.
After that, it was a traumatic experience for me because I felt it was a very good album at the time, and commercially it was an absolute zero. So I regressed. I said, wow, I've just satisfied my own needs, but I possibly blew the Four Seasons completely down the drain. And for the next 3 or 4 years, it was rough.
But time has been good to the Four Seasons. They've recovered, reorganized, and restaffed. And now they're back in the fight for change.
The fact that the drummer in the group has had the jazz influence, and I think the fact that Frankie is being utilized, again, Frankie has probably the greatest vocal instrument anybody could hope to have. And in effect, Frankie's voice is used on the Four Seasons albums at this point as an instrument. The very diverse backgrounds of all the members of the group, including Frankie, and of course with Bob's immense creativity, I think this blend will take the Four Seasons into some very unique musical directions in the future.
Nobody wins them all, but the real pros keep hanging in. Like his partner, Frankie Valli, Bob Gaudio is accustomed to winning in the long run.
It's interesting to work with Bob because while he's developed this great sense of progressive creativity in terms of today's music market, he's also the same Bob Gaudio who wrote Sherry and who wrote probably 30 major Four Seasons hits. So Bob has that tremendous commercial side of him, and when you blend that with the immense creativity that he has, I just can't imagine a more exciting group in terms of future prospects.
Next on the special of the week with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, silence is not golden.
99X, rockin' the apple in stereo.
It's pretty clear that the friendship of Frankie Valli and Bob Gaudio is the key to the Four Seasons' success. Their separate contributions are really indistinguishable. As Bob puts it,
being partners, we discuss everything and go over material and pick things and fight and scream and yell about things. So I'm involved in that, and I'm involved in the road show and what's going on with that and the whole operation from a business standpoint. I get involved in that too.
their relationship was put to the most severe test in the late 60s when the Four Seasons business empire began to come apart. A combination of personal disagreements and mistakes beset the group. It split up, leaving only Frankie and Bob. It's a wonder they made it.
We started to accumulate a lot of debts, and we were having some internal problems. We had to buy our partners out and so on and so forth. It got very confusing. Legal things and government things and the IRS and so on and so forth. But we didn't want to run away from the debts, and they totaled well over $1 million.
The debt was actually $1,400,000, but they paid it off when most people would have thrown in the towel.
We just didn't want to walk away from them. Maybe we're stupid at the time. We probably would have been better off, filing a bankruptcy or something. But in any event, we chose to pay off the debts, and we did. Frankie spent a lot of time on the road, worked twice as much as he could physically handle, and within 3 or 4 years, things started coming about, and the scuffling started to ease up a little bit. I think probably the hard times kept us together.
These things seemed to come in bunches. The great business problems were one thing, but that wasn't the half of it.
Silence is golden, golden, what my eyes still see.
Silence is Golden was a big hit for Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, but the sounds of silence descended suddenly with very little warning on Frankie one afternoon in 1967. He was going deaf. Voices, including his own, began to fade away. They called it otosclerosis, a building up of calcium in the ear that results in total silence. He's had corrective surgery with considerable success and pain. He's won the battle so far, but the future is uncertain. Inner strength is a surprising quality. Frankie Valli is a little man in size, only 5'7", but he's a big man inside. He didn't run. He paid his debts and his dues, and the world looks fairly bright now, financially and personally.
I am presently with a dynamite lady whose name happens to be Mary Ann, a very beautiful girl, very bright, who has been a very, very important instrument for me with the new success, the constant believer when you almost want to give up sometimes. It's nice to have somebody like that around.
Diane Bennett is a columnist for The Hollywood Reporter, a daily entertainment newspaper. She's a close friend of Frankie and Mary Ann.
Ever since I've known them, Frankie has been engaged to Mary Ann. And naturally, Mary Ann wanted to get married very, very much, and I'm sure Frankie did too. That was always their intention. But it just never happened.
Well, what are good friends for? Diane had a birthday coming up and was having a few friends in for the occasion anyway, so...
I said, why don't you guys get married on my birthday? So they looked at each other and said, that's a terrific idea. And they ran out and they got all the paraphernalia. We hired the Beverly Hills judge here, and we had it on my back patio, and it was fantastic.
Besides being the Valley's friend, Diane is a shrewd professional observer of the entertainment business. She has some interesting insights into Frankie's success.
How many rock stars put their group to the foreground? They usually try to shove them in the back. So here's Frankie again, proving what a good businessman he is. I mean, obviously it benefits him, but he doesn't put his ego always on the front line. He's willing to let these guys step up and be stars on their own.
It would seem that a mature personality is good for business.
They're very New York, Frankie and Mary Ann. If you can rent it, I mean, they're really not into buying. So I leaned on them, and they finally bought a house in Beverly Hills. And the bottom line is they made $150,000 profit in 1 year upon the sale of that house in Beverly Hills. So now they're looking at a house up in the hills in Beverly Hills for $400,000 that they're sure they can sell in a year or two for much more. And they're looking also to buy a house at the beach for another $400,000.
Turning on to what we got. Don't let go.
He's come a long way, Frankie Costelluccio, from a high school dropout in Newark, New Jersey, to the jet-set world of Beverly Hills, through trouble and ill health and even the IRS. He never stopped.
I'm one of those kind of believers who thinks that there is nothing that cannot be accomplished by an individual, depending upon how much you want to put into it and how much guts you have. Nobody can put you down for trying, man. I mean, that's what life is all about. And if you think you might be good for something, you should try it. So you fall on your face, you get right back up. What's the big deal?
And so we have the story of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. They faced the trials of the past and the challenges of the present. We can only assume the future holds even newer, more sophisticated concepts. But for many, the 3.5 octave sound of Frankie Valli is a reminder of another, more awkward time, when he and the Four Seasons spoke of things to a generation of teenagers that they couldn't say to each other. Frankie's high, clear voice sings to us, not only now, but with us in our mind's ear, whenever we reach out of the radio and into the back seat of our hearts. The special of the week on Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons was written and produced by George Burns. Our director was Lee Hansen. Our engineer, Steve Booth. Special thanks to Dave Schwartz and Steve Resnick for their help finding the rare Frankie Valli recordings. The special of the week is produced and distributed by Watermark Incorporated. Executive producer, Tom Rounds. Toyota hopes you've enjoyed this week's special of the week.
Toyota, TDK Recording Tapes, and Crazy Eddie have proudly presented the 99X Special of the Week. Next Saturday night at 10 o'clock, we'll feature Lou Rawls on the station that's rocking the apple in stereo, 99X.